Hello there. So in this video, what I'm doing is looking at the acceptable use policy for Milford Exempted Village School District, which is where I currently work. I'm using the reading for this particular lesson to kind of verify or look at changes, things that are present in the document or maybe need to be adjusted, in my opinion, based on the readings. I was actually surprised to find that generally I thought it was a well-written document for a school district. It's not one that I had looked at extensively. I do work with our curriculum coordinator on quite a few things, so I am aware of some of the things that she believes to be issues, so I could definitely see those in the document. But there are some changes that I thought need to be made or are possible changes based on the reading that I will go through in this short video. So just to clarify, anything you see in light blue and in bold are things that I have somehow altered or changed in some way based on my beliefs or thinkings. So the first thing is the document or the readings talk about having kind of a clear language. And when I think about clear language, I think of not what just parents can understand, but the students can understand, because the students are also the ones who are um, signing this document as well and verifying. So if they don't understand the language clearly, they may not understand, one, the consequences, but two, what they're actually being told they can and cannot do. The other thing was the idea that most of them will start with some kind of vision statement. And I found that the Milford AUP definitely starts with a vision statement, but I thought that the wording gets a little lost and lofty. I think sometimes when we try to build these statements, we try to throw in all the vocab that we can to make them sound brilliant and sophisticated. But in reality, I think in the AUP, it should be understandable. It needs to be something that the kids can understand. So my first change, it says the Milford Exempted Village School District Board of Education recognizes that an effective educational system develops students who are, and I changed the really lofty wording and decided to use something I thought students can understand. And it says connected to the world around them and help them become more proficient users of information, media, and technology to succeed in a digital world. So it's that acknowledgement that there are different tools that can help them do many different things, to become more proficient with it, to become better at it. Because you know what? When you grow up later in their life, your world is going to be different, and your world is very digital, and you need to understand how to do those things to succeed. I made some other small changes in the second paragraph of the kind of vision statement of the school. I used as a tool. They used a very sophisticated word there that I don't think the kids would connect with. Engaging and meaningful. So I can change some of the verbs that were used there to make them a little more understandable for students. I also wanted to add, you'll see I added the district's technology resources will enable educators and students to manage their work as they collaborate with others and improve their problem-solving abilities to prepare them for their future. So I changed the wording of what our district had it there as well. They want to put some emphasis on just it's not technology for technology's sake, but also that the technology is a resource. It should have some kind of productivity to it. But with productivity also comes collaboration. So we want our students to be able to collaborate with the technology as well, but also use that to help with their problem solving abilities. So we wanted to clarify that, and I think it's in language that students can understand quite better. So after the vision statement, it gets more into some of the specifics of using the actual network and what's expected as things that you can do and can't do. I did find that our AUP does a good job of actually trying to address both sides of this. So the first section was on filtering and monitoring. I wanted to add a section. If you can see the top one here is there wasn't much mentioning in the filtering about social media or texting, which of course the students have access on their phones as well. So we want to make sure to mention that students shouldn't be sharing anything that's objectionable, even if it's across social media, even if it's across your phone, such as texting, not just images that you might find on websites and things like that are inappropriate. Any inappropriate material is something that students shouldn't be able to have access to at school. And there's things that can't always be blocked. So this section talks a little bit about how, yes, there's a filter, but it may not catch everything. So we want to make sure that we cover our bases there. The next section or next spot that I changed is there are students that sometimes come across things accidentally. They click something, they type in a web address wrong, and something pops up that might not be appropriate. More often than not, it's probably the kids doing things that they're not supposed to, but it does happen. So in the language, it talks a lot about what happens if, it's very harsh into what could happen if you see this or pull up this objectionable material. But I wanted to leave some wiggle room in there that if students do come across that objectionable material, that they should feel that they have the ability to report it immediately to school officials to make sure that they don't get themselves in trouble versus waiting till later and then having an issue where they're accused of something. The other thing, moving down here, talking about internet use and what kids are looking at, it starts to get into adult supervision. The document was very vague in the original, talking about basically reasonable supervision, which is probably left very open for legal reasons, because reasonable doesn't really define anything. So I kind of put a little definition into what I think should be kind of a minimal expectation of staff members. It says a staff member shall be present at all times when students have been required by teachers to access network resources. Staff is not responsible for monitoring students who access the network during times that are not permitted at school. This includes areas outside the classroom, such as the hallways and other facilities. So I think it does put some responsibility on the staff to at least be present, not necessarily saying that nothing will ever be seen by accident or students won't be the mischievous people they are, but at least having an expectation of what's expected from the staff, but also absolving us of any responsibility if students access things on their own outside of the classroom or areas where they have kind of free space or free time. The next one says, of course, giving that kind of expectation the staff is not liable for what students look at. It says staff members are not liable for any inappropriate material that students access on the internet, but are required to report abuse. So in the end, we're not responsible for if a student brings up something they're not supposed to. They are responsible. But if we do observe it as staff members, we should be required to report what we've seen and not just let it go and have something come up later. So those were some important changes in the filtering section. Personal responsibility, again, I kind of went into that idea of things being accidental at times. So if you see misuse or if misuse occurs, and you didn't do it purposefully, you should let somebody know right away so you don't get accused of doing something that you weren't supposed to be doing. Now, under this section, it gets more into privacy, which it mentions that anything you do on computers at school is not private, that system managers, the people in the district, have access to all those things that you're doing. Now, in the original, it mentions basically that if you're doing something illegal, that they will forward those things and activities to authorities. But I think it was important, and it's a key word here, that the word all is here, all messages, including those relating or supporting illegal activities. So I think it's important for people to know that we're not just saying, hey, we got access to things or we'll access things that are illegal or wrong, that all that information becomes the property of the school and that all messages are can be seen if need be, so that you should be aware of what you're browsing and what you're doing and what you're doing on the network. Number 3 on here talks about the ownership of data. Basically, the original talks about how basically the district owns any information or things that are created using using the school property or the district's, but it wasn't exactly clear. So I broadened it to mean all electronic data created on accounts linked to the district. So it doesn't matter if it's a Google account, Prezi account, if you have a district assigned account, anything and everything you do on that is technically the property of the school in terms of access and the fact that they own it and they can distribute it in some way. The number 4 talks about the rules of regulations online, and I think they did do a good job here of connecting it to the code of conduct to make sure it's understood that you are supposed to behave online as you are expected to behave in person. But I think it is important here to note some examples to students, or samples and non-examples. But I included in there, this includes acts of bullying, hazing, or harassment through the use of technology and social media in and out of the school setting. I think it's just important to put it there, even though it's part of the code of conduct, because those are some of the biggest issues that are seen in that particular environment. Down here, number 5, I changed this as users retain responsibility for the activity of anyone accessing the computer and or network under their accounts, unless the actions of another individual can be clearly identified. There was originally did not have that last part, I did think it was a little harsh to say, hey, we know that somebody hacked into your account and used information in your account. We know it wasn't you, but we're holding you responsible for the things that happen. So I think, there's got to be some reasonability in there, in the fact that there are things that people can do. Even you can try your very hardest to keep your information from getting accessed. That we have to understand that if we can clearly identify that it wasn't you, we're not going to hold you accountable for those things. But if we clearly know that you're blatantly putting out there your information or somebody else's information and causing them harm, then action will be taken. 6 talks about students are responsible for maintaining and securing their own device. In the event that a device becomes lost, stolen, or tampered with, you must report it and report any abuse immediately. So it's not only your responsibility to maintain your device and keep it secure so things like this do not happen to you, but it is very, very important that I added that you actually report that abuse immediately so that, for example, that account can be shut down or things of that nature. We actually had a kid last week who had that exact problem where somebody was clearly tampering with his account, and to make sure that that particular student wasn't continuing to post and do things that were inappropriate, we closed his account or we changed the password so that could be taken care of to reduce any further issues. 6 talks about the network. It says computer systems in the district must be used for purposes related to education. I just added unless otherwise approved by a staff member who has received administrative approval. Sometimes there are things that are not particularly class related, but might be related to fundraisers or things that different groups may be doing within the school, where certain access may be warranted that may not be considered quote unquote educational. So as long as that approval is there, I think that should be permitted. The next one says violation of this policy and agreement may result in cancellation of user privileges and possible discipline under the student code of conduct. I added the student code of conduct because I think it's important that it talks about the code of conduct, but I think students need to understand that it's linked. I don't think originally in the document it really made it clear that those two are linked. That if you're violating things on here, it's also connected to the student code of conduct, and there may be things that you're violating from there. So it's really two connected documents, and students need to be specific with that. I need to take this part out. I'll do it right here because that was just my note there. Acceptable use, I thought that part was generally well done, and even I like the fact that they used some very good unacceptable use examples. They went through a lot of the key things that I've seen as a teacher that students will do from time to time that seem to be repetitive occurrences that they need to think about and make sure they don't engage in. I did add 3 more to add to that from things I've seen in the past. I added creating false accounts with the intent of hiding your identity on the network or shield inappropriate actions. So we have had students in the past who will try to create false accounts, whether it's Facebook, whether it's anything, or usernames that are not appropriate or whatever, to shield the things that they're saying and doing to other students. So that should be something as an example of a unacceptable use. Using another's identity to post information on the internet. That's another example of what I mean, and what I've seen. That could be because they've gotten somebody's login information, or somebody left a device open and they decided to get into their things and post like that, or creating again false accounts where they're pretending to be somebody else and posting as if they are that person. So another thing that we've seen from time to time. And finally, accessing confidential information owned by the district or a staff member. So that would be the instances where students are messing with maybe devices of teachers or things of that nature that might get them in trouble. We've seen that from time to time. And a lot of that, unfortunately, probably needs to go back to talking about professional development and teaching some of the teachers not to put themselves out there so easily, and not to leave devices laying around that will allow students to log into those various things. Moving on to privacy, I added this record of usage shall remain with the district for a time period at a minimum will satisfy state law or longer should the district choose. So basically, this section talks about how anything you do on the network can be retained and saved by the district for a period of time. It doesn't really say how long, so I decided that there should be a minimum. I know the state typically requires minimum times that the district has to hold on to specific information. I like that this pretty much says that we will hold on to it for a minimum, but if we choose for our discretion, we can hold on to that information as long as we so choose. The section on vandalism I thought was well written in terms of what the consequences are for vandalism and what some examples of that vandalism are. The warranties and indemnifications is more of kind of that legal jargon talking about basically absolving the district of any things that could be done wrong in the network and having any responsibility for it. So I thought that section was fine as well. Then it gets down to the very important part, of course, of having a place for not just students to sign, but parents to sign. And of course, then to print clearly to make sure it's legal. And then at the end, these are the different links, or I should say, citations to the different codes and things that are part of law that make themselves known also in this document as well. So the things that have to be in there for legal reasons. So I thought that was appropriate as well. So I feel overall that the AUP is actually pretty well written, except for some minor things that I saw that I think fit things that are common trends that are happening today. But looking at the reading for this week, I thought some things such as the tone. I thought the tone of the document was appropriate. It doesn't sound, it puts it clear out there what the expectations are, but also what can happen if you don't meet those expectations. But it also puts out there essentially what you are expected to do, not just what you're not expected to do. And I do like, as the readings talked about from this week, is linking it to the overall code of conduct. So linking it to the fact that there are things in the code of conduct that apply here in the AUP as well. And I do love that it went through acceptable uses and also unacceptable uses. And also that tone, as it said in the reading, about shared responsibility, that this isn't just everything's on the student. There are certain things the students have to do here. There are certain things that the staff have to do here. And there are certain things as parents that the parents need to be doing as well. One thing that the reading did mention was consequences. I don't know that this AUP really goes into the exact consequences other than sometimes threatening the idea of losing access to the network. It is possible, looking at the student code of conduct that it kind of links to, that there may be some specific consequences there. But that might be something that the district considers, whether or not we want specific consequences here. But I will add that I think that might be tough sometimes, because as we know as teachers, every instance and everything that happens has unique circumstances. There's lots of things you have to consider when something happens or students do something on the network that's inappropriate, and thinking about their background or things we know and what happened and exactly what happened that can really affect, in my opinion, those consequences. So I don't know if, other than mentioning that you might lose access to the network, that maybe it's not a good idea to get too specific, because then you might be held to those standards. So just a general thought there. So anyway, there you have it. Those are my suggested changes to the current AUP at my school district. I hope it's thorough here, and I hope that it helped people think about the AUPs that they've looked at as well.